Hello students, I'd like to show you how to do the Alum lab. I'm not going to actually do the lab because it takes 2 days, but I'll show you the equipment and explain some things to you. The first thing is you need a 150 milliliter beaker. If it's a little smaller or larger, that's okay, but 150 works the best. And you're supposed to take a permanent marker and right here is your permanent marker, and write your name on the beaker. Then you need about 0.2 grams of aluminum foil. It doesn't have to be exactly 0.2, but of course record as many digits as are shown on the scale. That's about the right size for the thinner aluminum. If it was thicker aluminum, you probably wouldn't need this large of a piece, but it's about that size right there. And so you can put your name on the beaker, hit tear. Once the beaker's on the balance, put your aluminum foil in there and make sure you write down the mass of the aluminum foil. And then you're going to have to take scissors and cut the aluminum foil into tiny pieces inside of the beaker. So then put that inside of the beaker. You will need about 10 milliliters of potassium hydroxide. So it's about 10, so you don't have to be exact. So here's your potassium hydroxide. You can use the dropper bottle. Remember, don't let the pipette touch your 10 milliliter graduated cylinder. Okay? So it's about 10 milliliters. You don't have to be exact because the potassium hydroxide is not the limiting reactant. If anything, you want to go just a little bit over as opposed to under. This is a strong base. It's also fairly concentrated. It's concentrated enough that you don't want to get that on your hands. If you do get on your hands, rinse it immediately. You can use gloves today. I don't think it's imperative, as long as you're careful and you rinse your hands immediately. Now goggles, definitely you have to have goggles on. And if you have long hair, make sure that it's back. Even though we're not using a flame, if you have long hair and it hits something, you can knock it over or you can get it on your hair. I don't want you to do that. So then you're going to, your aluminum foil will be in little pieces. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but so you have the aluminum foil in little pieces, and you're going to add the potassium hydroxide, and then you're going to use a stir rod, and you're supposed to stir it for about 30 minutes, okay? And all of the aluminum will dissolve. Now, if there are dark particles, so if you see dark particles in here, you're supposed to filter this solution. And I have a setup here. I don't know if you can see it, so I'll move it over so you can see it. This is a thick-walled tubing, and it's connected to the vacuum. Don't connect it to the gas. And then it's connected to my Buckner funnel that has a side arm on it for aspirating. And then I have a Buckner funnel. I've heard it called Buchner and Buckner. And it's got like a stopper with a hole in it, so that fits on top of the Erlenmeyer flask. So for filtration, Erlenmeyer flask. It's clamped. The reason it's clamped is if it's not clamped, this hose can knock it over. And then, of course, inside of it, you have to put a piece of funnel paper. I've got 2 different sizes. I wrote funnel. This one's for funneling. We'll use filter paper. I said funnel paper, filter paper. We're going to use filter paper for the funnel, and we're going to use a different piece of filter paper on day 2. So you put that in there. Now, one of the things I forgot is distilled water. Before you pour anything into the funnel, turn it on, and then take the distilled water and wet the filter paper. Because if you don't, when you go to pour something in, if the filter paper is not stuck to the bottom, what you're pouring in could slip under the filter paper, and then you're not going to get proper filtration. So it says if you have any little black particles on this, you need to filter it. Okay? Now, when you filter this, the solution is going to come down into the flask. And you need that. So you're going to have to unhook everything. You're going to have to take off the funnel, which is going to be dirty. And I want you to make sure you rinse that. And you're going to have to throw away the filter paper. You're going to have to make sure the vacuum's off. You're going to have to undo the flask, and then you'll dump it back into your original beaker. Okay? Now this step is only if there's little black particles. One other thing I need to tell you is that when you're filtering, sometimes if you turn on the vacuum, you kind of push it down to get a better suction. But be careful. My hand got stuck. So be really careful. This is pretty strong. Okay? And the other thing that you need to know is before you unhook the hose, turn off the vacuum. Okay? Then you can unhook the hose. So be really careful about that. Okay, the next step is that you are going to add 4.5 molar, about 5 milliliters of H2SO4. So this is sulfuric acid. It's a strong acid, fairly concentrated enough we don't want it in our eyes or on our skin. It says 5 milliliters. So again, this is not the limiting reactant, so you don't have to be accurate or precise. You can even put a little more than 5 with the sulfuric acid. And also, please make sure you put the lids back on these, okay? Because if somebody knocks this over, that's not going to be a good situation. So make sure you put the lid back on and it's tight. Also, when you take the lid off, turn it upside down when you set it down on the bench top, okay? And then again, make sure you put it back on real tight, okay? So now you're supposed to heat this. So you're going to have it on the hot plate. That was the reason for the hot plate being here. Now the first time when you added potassium hydroxide, you stirred it. Now we're going to use this little metal. It's a magnet, and it's coated with plastic. So the way this works, before you begin this, make sure before you drop this in that the stir is off. Because if you have the stir on, I'm going to show you what happens. The thing can start to go splash everything. So you want the stir to be off, excuse me, the stir control, the button. Make sure that your beaker's right in the middle of the hot plate, okay, when you use this little stir bar. If you don't use a little magnetic stir bar, it doesn't matter where the beaker is. Of course, as you get towards the edge, it gets dangerous. But when you use the magnetic stir bar, it has to be in the middle. Now you can slowly turn it up, and it'll start to spin. And if it's not in the middle, you'll see it'll be hitting the side of the beaker, so move the beaker. There. So now it's stirring, and now you can turn on the heat. Okay, so when all the lump is gone, you're done. If you're losing too much water, you can add some. Take this off. Careful, it might be hot. Clean everything up, and we'll stick this in a drawer till next week.